Hey guys, this is Undercover Dudes all the way from Down Under, and today I'm going to be talking about the big differences between Paladins and Overwatch. Now personally, Paladins, it feels more like a MOBA-like first-person shooter. It has a ton of MOBA elements that I really want to go and talk about today. And when I first played Paladins and compared it to Overwatch many months ago, I thought that, okay, it's just free to play Overwatch. Not that it's a bad game, but overall, I thought it was a game that had basically no unique characteristics. However, the more and more I played the two games, I realized that the way I was playing Overwatch and the way I was playing Paladins were fundamentally different, and I believe it is due to the MOBA elements that really goes and shapes my playstyle. Now let's get right into it. The first thing I want to go and talk about is the pre-match lobby, or in the case of Overwatch, the lack of a pre-match lobby. The pre-match lobby for Paladins basically emulates what we have in MOBAs, for example Smite, which is made by the same company hi-rez, Dota 2, League of Legends, and so on. You go and lock in the champion that you're willing to go and play for the whole match, and you can't go and leave the game. Well, you can go and leave the game, but you won't be able to go and start another one, and leaving Paladins games is really frowned upon. Compare that to Overwatch, where in the casual scenario at least, it's very much a hop in, hop out type scenario, and whenever you're in spawn, you can go and swap to whatever hero is available. Now compared to two games, in Paladins, you definitely have to think a little bit more about what champion you want to go and lock in. With that game, you have to go and see, okay, what mode it is, what map it is this character powerful on defense, is it, slightly weaker on offense? You have to go and make that little bit of a trade-off. But in Overwatch, you don't really have to go and make that trade-off. You can go and kind of feel out the enemy, and if the enemy's running a certain composition, you can go and swap to another champion that goes and counters it, and then on the defense, you can go and play another champion that, really succeeds on that side of the map. Overall, you can go and swap depending on your circumstances, but in Paladins, you have to have a little bit of foresight. You have to go and recognize, okay, this is who I'm locking in, and I have to go and really be careful of where I use that hero in certain scenarios. I know I said hero, it's champions and Paladins, but what a very easy to go and get mixed up. But overall, completely different ways of thinking, completely different strategies around it. And from that point alone, I would go and say that Paladins is definitely not an Overwatch clone, and Overwatch is definitely not a Paladins clone. I know a lot of people have been making that, type of argument as well. Everybody's focusing on the champions, but the champions are definitely not the be-all and end-all, especially in that first video where I go and debunk a lot of the myths around the certain characters being copies of another. Now my second point really goes and blows the whole argument wide open, and that is customization. Now in Overwatch, when you go and play a certain hero, the only thing that you can really go and change about that hero is your own playstyle. For example, with Reinhardt, if you want to go and sit back and defend your carries, then you can go and do that with your shield. But if you want to go right on the front lines, you want to go and get nano boost, so you can go and do that as well and deal a ton of damage. However, the thing that you can't go and change in Overwatch is the base properties of that character. So for example, you can't go and have, a low cooldown on Reinhardt's charge, you can't go and have a higher damage on his swing. Everything is standardized across the board, and I think a lot of people really crave for that. That might sound a little bit counterintuitive because everybody loves customization, but in a game that's going in a competitive direction like Overwatch, having everything standardized, it makes it really easy to know, okay, that character 100% of the time, I'll be able to go and kill that person in X hits of Y weapon or whatever. Everything is standardized, and you know exactly when that person will go and die, you know exactly the time to kill. Now compare that to Paladins, and there's two fundamental ways that you can really go and transform your champion, and that is through decks and that is through items. Now with your deck, what happens is you have your base deck, and that can go and change certain characteristics. So for example, I'm playing a ton of Victor, and I know his deck quite well. And with that said, my personal deck that I've been running, I run a lot of health, I run a lot of durability. Like if I'm sprinting and I go and get shot, I can go and sprint a little bit faster, and I went and removed the decreased recoil one. I didn't really care about that. Overall, I focus on durability. But with that said, you also have a legendary card, and this legendary card really goes and transforms the champion into basically something completely different. Every champion has 3 different legendary cards, and for example, Victor, his first one is 30% increased hipfire damage, the second one is 15% increased aim down sight damage, and the third one, completely different to the first two, is whenever he goes and sprints, the ability is called Hustle, he goes and heals for a certain amount per second. In the end of it, it's the same champion, but you're playing it so differently, and that is really, really cool. It goes and brings the longevity of this game so much more further. People going to discovering builds every time a new patch comes around, because something might have changed with the champion just a little bit, but that could go and blow up a potential new build, and that could really go and transform a champion. And tier list in Paladins, they're always changing depending on nerfs, but also depending on what cards and legendaries you can go and run on that champion. Now, the next thing I want to go and talk about is the item shop in Paladins. Now, with the start of a match, you have to go and lock in your deck, you have to go and lock in your legendary, and with that said, you can't go and change it throughout the match. But what you can go and change throughout the match is what direction you want to go with that character in terms of, okay, I want to go and deal more damage, I want more defensiveness, I want more utility, I want more healing, etc. And that is through the item shop. Now, the item shop in Paladins is definitely less comprehensive in comparison to, let's say, League of Legends. In League of Legends, you've got a shit ton of items you can go and choose from. In Paladins, you only have 16. But with that said, with those 16 items, for each of the 4 categories, you can only go and pick one. But with that certain item, you can go and have a level 1 version, that's the initial buy, but then you can go and upgrade it, level 2, level 3. So you can really go and specialize down certain directions if you really want to. So for example, if you're playing a champion that is focused on getting their ultimate is up as soon as possible, then what they can go and do is buy morale boost. And morale boost, what it goes and does, it boosts the rate that you go and charge your ultimate, and you can go and focus down that if you like. And with that said, you can go and get Haven if you want to go and get less damage dealt to you by direct attacks, and there's different types of ways that you can go and specialize your champion in game. Now, I have one last point that I really want to go and focus on, and that is the way that healing works in both of these games. With Paladins, let's say you want to go and heal up to 100% HP. The way to go and do that is, one, ask your teammate. If you have a healer teammate, they can go and, heal you up, maybe get the 100% HP. Maybe you have to just go and sit out, maybe the teammate's going to heal you up a little bit, or you can go and use an ability, or you can go out of combat. And when you're out of combat for a certain amount of time, you can go and regenerate health at a rapid pace. Now compare that to Overwatch, where the way to go and get back up to 100% HP, that's through, medkits, that's through an ability, that's through a teammate's ability. But overall, there's no guaranteed way to get 100% HP because there's no out of combat regeneration. And because of that, the way you go and play the 2 games is fundamentally different. In my opinion, Overwatch is much more of an aggressive, much more of a team-based game. Not saying that Paladins isn't a team-based game, but there is much more of a solo carry element. Because you don't have to necessarily rely on your teammates for heals. If you want to go and get a heal, you just go out of combat. And because of that, it goes and has measured amounts of aggressiveness. So if you want to go in for that last shot as Kinessa, she's the sniper girl, by the way, in Paladins. If you want to go for that and you have 100 HP, you're taking a risk. And a lot of the time, a lot of people won't go and take that risk. A lot of people just go back and heal up their HP. But in Overwatch, if you're, let's say, Widowmaker, you have 100 HP, and you can go and make that final shot that could potentially go and change the game, but could potentially go and throw the game. There's no kits around, there's no healers around you. A lot of people will go and make that shot. And overall, the aggressiveness in Overwatch, I think, is definitely a lot higher in comparison to Paladins. And personally, I prefer Paladins. I like the measured amount of control that it has in that game. I like how, you pick your fights a little bit more, while in Overwatch it's a bit of a clusterfuck, 100% of the time realistically. But in the end of it, they're 2 different games, and I play both of these games quite a lot, and I enjoy both of these games. In the end of it, I think that the fact that these games are different is really good. In the end of it, people still going to go and draw a lot of comparisons between the characters of these games. The characters between these games feel very similar. Even though when you go and play it out, a few of their abilities are different, but the base idea of these champions and heroes are very similar. You take Victor, Soldier 76, you take Kinessa, Widowmaker. Overall, there is comparisons that can be made to basically every Overwatch hero to every Paladins champion. But I think that is such a one-dimensional view of these games. Going and basing these games simply because of what champions and what heroes they have in these games, is really one-dimensional, because the way you go and play with these heroes and champions is completely different between these two games. Completely different. There's really no way to go and say, okay, the way you play Overwatch is the same way you play Paladins, because it's not. Yes, you can have aggressive and defensive playstyles, but the way you interact with your teammates, the way you interact with your enemies, is basically completely different. The overall going and calling Overwatch a MOBA wouldn't make sense, but going and calling Paladins a MOBA would make a lot of sense in my opinion. A first-person MOBA would make a lot of sense for a title for Paladins. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this commentary. If you did, make sure to go and give it a like rating. But other than that, Undercover Dudes all the way from Down Under, out.